We are cozying up for another winter week inside and spending a lot of time in the kitchen. This week, I am planning to make 3 meals completely from scratch and trying some new things. So the very first thing that I'm getting going in the kitchen this morning is some bagels. I have made sourdough bagels before, but this time I'm using all freshly milled flour. I'm trying to make some easy and healthy breakfast options to have on hand. So these bagels will be really good for us to just spread with some cream cheese for a quick breakfast on the go, or to make into a breakfast sandwich. My goal is to really familiarize myself with making these bagels using fresh milled flour so that I can get them into my rotation of things that I keep on hand. That is how I do a lot of things in my kitchen. I have a rotation of recipes or baked goods that I just keep on hand all the time. So that way, when I'm busy, I don't have to look up recipes. I have those staple ingredients in my refrigerator or the pantry. Lately, I've been wanting to try to broaden that rotation of meals. So the best way for me to do that is to spend a little bit of extra time in the kitchen learning how to do those skills. And right now is a perfect time of year for that. There is still snow on the ground and it's cold outside. So this week I have some new recipes that I'm going to try out. The very first recipe that I wanted to try this week is a potato gnocchi, which I realize I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but this is something I always wanted to try, but felt kind of overwhelmed by the process. So I thought this would be the perfect week to give it a go. I am following a recipe from the cookbook Magnolia Table to make the potato gnocchi. I'm going to add it in to a soup. We had some carrots and celery in the refrigerator that needed to be used up. I always keep chicken broth on hand this time of year, and I have some sourdough bread fermenting. So I thought this would come together for a really good wintertime meal. I don't see myself adding this in my rotation of go-to meals. I always make soups and it's just easy to chop up potatoes to throw into the soup. So making the gnocchi was definitely an extra step that I probably won't do very often. However, I did make quite a bit and I was able to freeze some. And I think that would be a great way to preserve extra potatoes from our garden is to spend a day in the kitchen prepping them and then freezing it for soups later on in the year. So this is definitely a recipe that I will circle back to, but likely not until next fall after we harvest potatoes from our garden. Wintertime meals look very different for me than meals during the summertime. In the wintertime, I try to focus on hearty meals with root vegetables, a lot of meat, and broth. During the summertime, our meals are much simpler. Usually it is just meat and then fresh vegetables that we harvested from the garden. We are always eating a lot later during the summertime, usually not until after dark. So summertime meals definitely feel a bit more rushed and more of just a chore to get them on the table. But wintertime meals, I can really focus on different recipes and really nourishing foods because of how much more we're inside and the days are shorter. So that gives me more time in the kitchen to spend prepping and preparing these types of meals. I have been making the same sourdough bread recipe for years. Recently, I started adding in some fresh milled flour instead of using all whole purpose. And it's a bread that is so easy for me to make because it's such a routine in my schedule. I do it at the beginning of every week. And I think having some go-to easy things like that is so important to kind of keep your kitchen operating and flowing. But trying new things every now and then is something I really want to try to be better about. So instead of making my same go-to bread recipe, I decided to try a different one. I'm doing a 100% whole grain sandwich loaf, and I'm making a double batch so that we have 2 loaves on hand. A goal of mine this winter was to try to figure out how to use exclusively fresh milled flour in my kitchen. And I've been doing some of it, mostly just with baking, but I haven't found the go-to bread recipe yet. We just like that other sourdough loaf so much, and I just add in a third of it with fresh milled flour to get those added nutrients. But I'm trying a couple loaves today that is exclusively fresh milled flour. We did like how it turned out, although we still like our other loaf better. But I think it's important to just keep trying different recipes until you kind of find what works for you and then really familiarizing yourself with that one. Our freezer right now is full of pork. So last summer, well, actually last spring, we got a group of pigs to raise over the summertime. We raised them out on kind of a wooded pasture area. And most of them we sold to other local families as half or whole hogs. But we decided to keep 2 of them for ourselves to put into our freezer. And our goal is for that to last us an entire year, which we think it will. We also eat a lot of beef and chicken, but we found that even though it's really just me and my husband, and now my daughter is eating pretty good, we go through so much meat. The reason for that is we eat every meal pretty much from home. We rarely go out to dinner. That's like a special occasion. So we just use a lot of food because we're always making meals, and I'm trying to always do from scratch meals. But with the pigs in my freezer, I have some things that I haven't really cooked before. So what I'm making today is a ham hock soup. So I'm putting some beans and vegetables and then the ham hock in my Instant Pot and just letting it slow cook all day so that this evening we have a soup that's ready to go. And I will serve it with the fresh milled sourdough bread that I'm coming back to all day, just doing some stretch and folds. Get them in loaf pans. I'm going to let one slow ferment during the day out on the counter, and I'm going to put the other loaf into the refrigerator to bake later on in the week. Something we have been chipping away at this winter is stocking our old barn with firewood for next winter. So the best time to cut firewood is a year in advance, so that way it has plenty of time to dry out and be good burning wood for indoor wood burning stoves, which is predominantly how we heat our house in the wintertime. So I've shared with you guys before, but we live in a very small space. It's about 1,000 square foot inside of a shed. We finished off a living quarters, and we have a wood burning stove in there, and it keeps us so warm and cozy, but it does take a lot of firewood to keep it going all winter. So our goal is to try to get as much stashed away in this old barn as possible so that next winter we have plenty for the entire season. Fortunately, on our farm, we have like an endless supply of firewood. We're always scouting dead trees during the summertime so that we know which ones we can go out and cut for our wood burning stove. The next completely from scratch recipe that I'm going to try this week is lasagna. Obviously, I have made lasagna before, but I wanted to give it a try with making my own noodles. I'm also using some ground sausage from our pork in the freezer. I love lasagna because it's filling and it's easy to make, although it is sort of a process. So I don't make it very often, and mostly that's because I typically don't have lasagna noodles on hand. But today I'm making a double batch of the noodles, and I'm actually making a double batch of lasagna. So I'm gonna make a lasagna to have for dinner tonight, and I'm gonna make one up and freeze it for a freezer meal. And I'm also gonna just freeze an extra batch of lasagna noodles. So that way, the next time I want to make it, I don't have to go through the process of making the noodles. This has been one of those weeks where the baby has totally gone off of any sort of nap schedule, and he has not been taking naps very well at all during the day. I think he's just going through a transition right now. So I feel like my week hasn't been overly productive because I can never just focus on one thing when he doesn't nap, or I don't know when my nap times are going to be. It can get kind of difficult. But the thing with all of this is just doing it on my own time. There's no pressure to get all of this done. And making these from scratch meals are supposed to be enjoyable. So I've been trying to just make them as I can and enjoy this slower season and extra time that I get to spend inside.